Hey everyone, so we're back with another video, and today we're talking about Wobbly Hedgehog syndrome. This is my very first video on this topic because I always hesitate to address medical issues among hedgehogs because sometimes people think that they can diagnose a pet with a video, and that is not the case. I'm very passionate about that. I did a whole video about the fact that I'm not a vet and that you guys should watch if you have not watched it. But I did want to go ahead and give you guys more information about the topic because it is a disease that impacts hedgehogs and hedgehog owners should be aware of it. So first and foremost, what is Wobbly Hedgehog syndrome? Wobbly Hedgehog syndrome is a neurological disorder that many hedgehogs can develop if they are from poor breeding stock. We're not entirely positive whether or not it is completely genetic or whether or not it involves some more external components like diet or environment. We're not entirely sure. However, we have discovered fairly conclusively that it does have to do with genetics to an extent. This disease causes progressive paralysis among hedgehogs, which means that eventually the hedgehog that is afflicted by this disease will lose use of its limbs. The most common symptom you will see first is a stiffening of limbs, along with a bit of a wobble, a shaky gait, things like that. The reason I am discussing this, because for the most part, this disease is fairly straightforward, is because it is misdiagnosed among many hedgehogs. People tend to assume that their hedgehogs have Wobbly Hedgehog syndrome before checking some of the other issues that cause the similar symptoms. The reason this happens so frequently is because there is no way to diagnose a living hedgehog with Wobbly Hedgehog syndrome. The only way to truly know if a hedgehog has Wobbly Hedgehog syndrome is to perform a necropsy, of course post-mortem. After your hedgehog dies, they will look at your hedgehog's brain and be able to tell if a hedgehog had it or not. This means that whenever a hedgehog is diagnosed with WHS, it is a guess. Now, unfortunately, some people jump to this diagnosis very quickly, but I'm here to tell you that if you suspect something is wrong with your hedgehog and you go to a vet and they immediately say your hedgehog has WHS, you need to see a different vet, or you need to insist that the vet run some tests on your hedgehog. Reason being is that there are many other issues that cause the same symptom. Some of those being ear infections, general infections, sometimes hedgehogs get hair wrapped around their limbs and it causes paralysis in that specific limb. Sometimes they're in pain and you can't tell what it's from, and it makes them wobble or shake. There are many reasons why a hedgehog could possibly display these symptoms. I will list some of them on the screen for you, but essentially the only way that you can diagnose a living hedgehog with WHS is if you rule out everything else first. Now, a lot of people don't do this, and a lot of hedgehogs die with things that could have been fixed. Particularly things like ear infections, which cause hedgehogs to have a head tilt. It causes them to wobble when they walk, and a lot of hedgehogs get diagnosed with WHS instead of getting the proper antibiotics that they need to treat the infection, and they end up dying from the infection that could have been cured in the first place. Another way that you can tell if your hedgehog is sick with something beyond WHS is that WHS has a slow progression, which means it will start with small things like the stiffening of limbs and will slowly progress to more extremes like complete paralysis. This is different than some of the other illnesses you will see that I listed earlier because those diseases take effect very quickly. Owners notice them very quickly, and even though they tend to get misdiagnosed as WHS, they are fairly fast progressing diseases and illnesses. So it's really important to not automatically assume that your hedgehog has WHS. Now, what are some ways that you can avoid WHS? Well, there is no real way, if you already own your hedgehog, that you can prevent it. At least none that we know of at this point in time. The one way that is recommended to avoid it in general when purchasing a new hedgehog is to purchase from a reputable breeder. A reputable breeder will be a breeder who has pedigreed hedgehogs. This means that they have tracked their lineage. They know who their parents are, their grandparents, things like that, and their lineage does not contain a hedgehog that has WHS. Going to a reputable breeder can help prevent getting a hedgehog that is bound to get WHS in their future. WHS tends to take effect around the 1.5 to 2 year mark. It can start earlier. Now, if a hedgehog does have WHS, that isn't an immediate death sentence. There are plenty of people who have assisted their hedgehogs in living much longer lives even with WHS, particularly with helping them eat and things like that, but they do become special needs hedgehogs once the paralysis takes control. And once the paralysis is a more full body paralysis, unfortunately most hedgehogs need to be euthanized. But if it's only a leg or two, a lot of owners have found ways to cope and to help their hedgehogs continue to live a happy, albeit different life. You will see often now that breeders have Whs Guarantees, which means essentially if your hedgehog dies of what you suspect is WHS and you get a necropsy done that confirms it, they will give you a new hedgehog for free. This isn't the most pleasant sounding practice, but it is fairly common among breeders because sometimes it can happen. WHS crops up in lines from time to time that people don't expect. Overall, WHS is more common in hedgehogs from backyard breeders, breeding mills, and pet stores. This is because those hedgehogs are not from a tracked lineage, or they're not pedigreed, which essentially means there's no way to tell if someone previously in their lines has died from WHS. So knowing who you're buying from is incredibly important. I've told you guys before, but one of the best ways to track what kind of breeder you're getting your hedgehog from is to join hedgehog groups, because you can essentially ask other people's opinions and experiences with that breeder from groups of thousands of people that can give you feedback. So that's really it for this video. I hope that was helpful in teaching you guys a little bit about the disease. There isn't a ton to be said about it, and there isn't a ton of ways to prevent it, but you can prevent misdiagnosing your pet by allowing a vet or yourself to assume the worst prior to looking into other options. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you are all well, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.